All right, with National Guard boots reportedly on the ground at a training facility in Elwood, Illinois. They're from Texas. The fight over whether this is legal, whether it's constitutional, continues to intensify. So here to discuss what factors are playing into this clash between local leaders in the Trump administration, political science professor Stephen Caliendo from North Central College. Professor Caliendo, let me start off by asking you this kind of breaking news that Anita just had. Donald Trump's Truth Social post where he said that both Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker should be in jail for failing to protect ICE agents. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, at least he didn't preface it with Dear Pam, as he did for Comey. I mean, it's interesting. This is the morning that James Comey is going to be arraigned. After just a week or so ago, President Trump gave a similar social media post and directed Pam Bondi to go after some of his political enemies, including James Comey. That's happening today. I don't know what the pretext would be. If it's just rhetoric, if it's just sort of like I'm upset with these folks, that's one thing. But when the president says somebody should be in jail or be held to some criminal standards, it seems to be a signal to the Justice Department to do some work. And so we're going to have to keep our eye on this one.
Okay, and we will certainly do that. Now, to the question at hand, is President Trump allowed to send National Guard troops to Chicago here? As we're reporting, this group from Texas, about 300 of them are reportedly on the ground,
right.
Kind of on standby right
That's
now.
right. Which would get us up to about 500 if we think about the 200 Illinois National Guard troops that are set to be federalized. The question is this legal? And we don't know. I mean, the approach that this administration has taken has been to do what you want to do, wait for somebody to sue, and then move it through the court system, which of course is quite slow. We saw a very similar pretext in Portland, and when they sued, the federal court in that case ruled that it was unconstitutional. The president could not send the troops in. This hearing, as we know, I think Anita just reminded us, is going to be tomorrow. So we're going to find out tomorrow. But by that point, we may be, in the loop. We may see federal troops here in the city. And so what happens then? That's the big question. Are they going to turn around and leave? Or are they going to wait till the appeals process moves through? Governor Pritzker thinks that the idea is to get us used to having federal troops on the ground for whatever reason. And it is going to feel more and more natural. I woke up this morning to the sound of helicopters. I don't usually hear that. I don't know whether they were police helicopters, media helicopters, or whether they were military helicopters. But again, you're going to start to get used to the feeling. And then that moves us more and more toward not being able to resist.
There's a kind of a desensitizing kind of effect there. Now, in terms of questions like what tasks they're going to be asked to perform and how long they could be legally allowed to remain here in Illinois, any insight there?
60 days is typically the statutory limit about how long they can remain without some other kind of authorization. But I think that the worry here is that the president might be thinking toward the Insurrection Act. When the troops get here, if we see the protests turn more violent, it's going to be a pretext for the Insurrection Act, which can allow federal troops to be used in different sorts of ways. Right now, what we're hearing is that there's not going to be no law enforcement activities for these particular troops. Instead, they're going to be protecting the federal law enforcement agents who are here, ICE and Border Patrol specifically. But that can all change if the president believes that on the ground there's some danger or some insurrection. And so that's the word we're going to have to focus on.
Okay. Now, in terms of the principles and practices that you mentioned, the desensitizing factor, but the principles and practices we're used to seeing in this country, there's an image that is floating around widely on social media this morning where an ICE agent appears to be just pointing a weapon outside of, like, from a van. He's riding shotgun in the van and just pointing a weapon supposedly at a protester. How out of the norm is this?
Well, very far out of the norm. Very far out of the norm. Look, we have a First Amendment right to protest. We have a First Amendment right to express ourselves. We do not have a First Amendment right to assault people, to assault law enforcement officers or anybody else. That's where there's tension. But I think that as we start to move further and further away from those democratic principles that we've come to rely on so much, we haven't had presidents in the past who have turned the troops on American citizens unless there was a really dramatic reason to do so. If you think about the 1950s, after the Brown versus Board decision and states were ignoring the Supreme Court's ruling to desegregate schools, Dwight Eisenhower federalized the National Guard in Arkansas. So those are the kind of times when we had it. We haven't seen anything like that. All we've seen is protests. And my concern is that this president sees any sort of dissent as unlawful. Any sort of dissent is unlawful. And so, we don't want to see violent protests. We don't want officers put in harm's way. But the other thing, Anthony, I think we need to remember to think about is these folks who signed up for the National Guard did not sign up to police their own cities. They signed up to serve the country in a variety of ways. They're trained in particular ways. And so at some point, they're going to have to decide whether or not they're going to continue in those duties. I mean, it's not going to be an easy decision, not just for the troops on the ground, but for their leaders as well, because soldiers cannot obey unlawful orders. Right?
Wow.
And they're going to have to make decisions.
Yeah, that's a factor I hadn't quite thought about.
Right.
Stephen, thank you very much. Professor Caliendo, thanks for coming in, providing us with some insight. We will be right back with more Good Day Chicago right after this. Stay